Before we begin, let me ask you something. Have you ever wondered if the person you helped today might change your entire tomorrow? What if the beggar you ignore could have been your blessing? This is a story about a young woman who fed a forgotten old man under an orange tree, not knowing she was feeding her future. It will break your heart before it mends it. It will make you believe again. The morning air in Yaba, Lagos, was thick with the smell of burning tires and frying akara. Esther wiped sweat from her forehead as she stepped off the Danfo bus, her worn leather bag clutched tightly against her chest. Inside were two small containers, one with jollof rice and chicken for her lunch, the other with plain white rice and a boiled egg. The second container wasn't for her. "Esther," a voice called out. She turned to see her younger brother James waving from across the street. His school uniform already wrinkled, though it was barely 7 in the morning. "James, what are you doing here? You should be heading to school." The 16-year-old jogged over, his face breaking into a guilty smile. "I just want to make sure you had money for transport back home." Esther's chest tightened. She reached into her purse and pulled out a 50 naira note. "Take this. Buy something to eat at break time." "But sister..." "James." Her voice was firm but gentle. "I'll be fine. Now go or you'll be late." As she watched him disappear into the morning crowd, Esther felt a familiar weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. Their parents had died 3 years ago in a car accident on the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, leaving her to care for James. At 26, she had dreams of her own once. Maybe go to university, becoming a nurse, traveling beyond Lagos. But dreams were expensive and survival came first. She walked down the dusty road toward fast food factory, where she worked on the assembly line packing processed meals. The factory was a large, gray building that seemed to swallow the morning light. But before reaching the gates, Esther always made a stop. Under a massive orange tree at the corner of Industrial Road sat Papa Joe. That wasn't his real name. At least, she didn't think so. He'd never told her what to call him. So she started calling him Papa Joe, and he'd smiled at that, his weathered face crinkling like old paper. Papa Joe was different from other street people. He didn't beg aggressively or harass passers-by. He simply sat under that orange tree every morning, his clothes tattered and stained, his gray hair wild and uncombed. Most people crossed the street to avoid him. Children threw pebbles and called him Madman. Market women shooed him away from their stalls. But Esther saw something else in his eyes, a quiet dignity that suffering hadn't quite erased. "Good morning, Papa Joe," she said softly, approaching the tree. The old man looked up and his face brightened. "Ah, my daughter, you came again." "Of course." Esther sat beside him on the low concrete ledge, ignoring the curious stares of people passing by. She opened her bag and pulled out the container of rice and egg. "I brought you breakfast." Papa Joe's hands trembled slightly as he accepted the food. "You are too kind to this old fool." "You're not a fool, Papa Joe." Esther smiled. "You're my friend." As he began to eat, she noticed his breathing was more labored than usual. "Papa Joe, are you feeling all right? You sound tired." "Ah, just these old bones complaining." He waved a dismissive hand. "When you reach my age, everything hurts." He paused, looking at her intently. "But tell me, why do you do this? You don't have plenty for yourself. I can see it in your clothes, and how thin you are. Why share your little with me?" Esther thought about the question. It was one she'd asked herself many times, especially on days when hunger gnawed her stomach by afternoon because she'd given away half her lunch. "My mother used to say something," she finally answered. She would say, "If you have only 2 spoons of rice, share one, because the person you feed today might be the angel who saved you tomorrow." Papa Joe stopped eating. His eyes glistened with something that looked like tears. "Your mother was a wise woman." She was. Esther's voice caught. "I miss her every day." They sat in comfortable silence until Esther checked her phone and gasped. "Oh no, I'm going to be late." She jumped up, grabbing her bag. "Papa Joe, I have to run. I'll see you tomorrow, okay?" Go, my daughter." He waved her off. "And thank you. God will bless you." Esther sprinted toward the factory gates, her heart pounding. She couldn't afford to be late. Not again. Mr. Michael Adams, the factory owner, had recently implemented strict new rules. 3 late arrivals meant automatic suspension. This would be her second. She burst through the factory doors at exactly 7:29 a.m., 1 minute before the cutoff. Her co-workers Mary and Ruth were already at their stations, and they exchanged knowing glances as Esther rushed past. "Look who finally decided to show up," Mary said loudly, her voice dripping with sarcasm. She was a tall woman with a sharp face and sharper tongue. Ruth giggled, adjusting her hairnet. "Probably stopped to feed that dirty madman again." "Esther, when will you learn? That old fool is not your father." "Leave her alone," said another worker, an older woman named Grace. But her voice was quiet, easily drowned out by Mary's laughter. Esther said nothing. She learned that silence was sometimes the best response. She tied her own hairnet, put on her gloves, and took a position on the assembly line. The work was monotonous. Pack, seal, label, repeat. Pack, seal, label, repeat. Her hands moved automatically while her mind wandered. She thought about James's school fees, which were due next week. She thought about the leak in their one-room apartment ceiling that got worse every time it rained. She thought about Papa Joe's labored breathing. At lunch break, most workers gathered in the cafeteria, but Esther usually ate at her station to avoid the gossip and mockery. Today, however, the floor supervisor, Mr. Thomas, approached her. "Esther, Mr. Adams wants to see you in his office." Her stomach dropped. "Now?" "Yes, now." Mr. Thomas's expression was unreadable. Esther had only met Michael Adams once, during her job interview 2 years ago. He was a stern man in his early 50s, with gray streaking his dark hair and permanent frown lines around his mouth. People said he'd become bitter after his business partner had embezzled money and nearly destroyed the company. Now, he trusted no one. She climbed the stairs to the second floor, her legs feeling like lead. The secretary waved her through, and Esther entered the spacious office. Michael Adams sat behind a large mahogany desk, reviewing papers. He didn't look up. "Sir, you asked to see me?" "Sit down, Esther." His voice was flat, professional. She perched on the edge of the chair, hands clasped in her lap. Finally, he looked up. "I've been reviewing attendance records. You've been late several times in the past month." "Yes, sir." "I'm sorry, sir. The traffic from my area." "Everyone deals with Lagos traffic, Esther. That's not a unique excuse." He leaned back in his chair, studying her. "However, your work quality is excellent. You have 0 errors in your packing records, and you've never called in sick. That's why I'm giving you a warning instead of suspension. But if you're late one more time, there will be consequences. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir." "Thank you, sir. You can go." Esther stood, but as she reached the door, Michael spoke again. "Esther?" "Yes, sir." "I heard something interesting from the security guard. He says you stop every morning to give food to the homeless man by the orange tree." Esther's heart raced. Was this against company policy? Would she be fired for this? "Is that true?" Michael asked. "Yes, sir," she whispered. Michael was quiet for a long moment. "Why?" "Sir, why do you feed him? What do you gain from it?" Esther looked down at her worn shoes. "I don't gain anything, sir. I can't walk past someone who's hungry when I have food to share, even if it's little." Michael's expression remained unreadable. "That's all. You can go." As she left the office, Esther felt confused. Was he angry? Impressed? She couldn't tell. The weeks that followed were difficult. The pressure at work increased as fast food factory tried to meet new production targets. Michael Adams walked the factory floor more often, his presence making everyone nervous. He watched everything with those sharp, calculating eyes. And Mary's harassment intensified. "Look at Mother Teresa," Mary would announce whenever Esther entered the cafeteria. "Too holy to steal, but not too proud to beg from mad people." Ruth would laugh on cue. "I heard the old man actually gives her money. That's why she keeps going back. She's running a begging scheme." "That's not true." Esther finally snapped one day, her patience exhausted. I've never taken anything from Papa Joe. Oh, so you admit you know his name? Mary's eyes gleamed with malicious joy. How close are you two, really? Maybe you're doing more than just feeding him. Enough! Mr. Thomas appeared, though his intervention seemed half-hearted. Back to work, all of you. But the damage was done. The rumor spread through the factory like wildfire. Even kind old Grace began to distance herself, afraid of being associated with the scandal. Esther felt more isolated than ever. The only bright spot in her days remained her morning visits with Papa Joe. "You look sad today, my daughter," Papa Joe observed one morning as she sat beside him. Esther had brought him toast and tea, a rare treat she'd managed by skipping dinner the night before. "It's nothing, Papa Joe. Nothing makes people cry." He pointed at her eyes, which were indeed watery. "Tell this old man what troubles you." And somehow, sitting under that orange tree as Legos woke up around them, Esther found herself pouring out everything. The mockery at work, the financial pressure, her fear of failing James, her loneliness. Papa Joe listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment, staring at the orange tree's leaves rustling in the morning breeze. "My daughter, let me tell you something," he finally said. "I have lived many years, seen many things, and I have learned this truth. Do right when no one is watching. Protect the weak. Tell the truth. Mockery is loud, but it does not last. Kindness is quiet, but it changes everything. But Papa Joe, sometimes I wonder if it matters. If anyone even notices." He smiled, that mysterious smile that made him seem younger somehow. "Someone always notices. God sees. And people see more than they admit." Esther didn't fully understand what he meant, but his words comforted her somehow. The following week, Papa Joe didn't appear under the orange tree. Esther waited for 15 minutes, growing increasingly worried, before she had to run to avoid being late. All day, she couldn't concentrate. What if something had happened to him? What if he was hurt or sick? Or, after her shift, instead of going home, she asked around the neighborhood. A fruit seller finally told her she'd seen that old madman being taken to General Hospital in an ambulance. Esther's blood ran cold. She used her transport money to take a taxi to the hospital, knowing she'd have to walk home. Several kilometers, but not caring. She found Papa Joe in a crowded ward, lying on a bed that had seen better days. He looked smaller somehow, more fragile. "Papa Joe." She rushed to his bedside. His eyes fluttered open. "My daughter, you came." "Of course I came. What happened? Are you all right?" A tired-looking doctor approached. "Are you family?" I'm his daughter," Esther lied without hesitation. The doctor's expression softened slightly. "He collapsed from pneumonia and malnutrition. He needs to stay here for at least a week, maybe more. But I have to be honest. The bills are accumulating. If no one can pay..." "I'll pay," Esther heard herself say. The doctor looked doubtful, taking in her worn clothes and tired face. "The bill is already at 50,000 naira and it will go higher." 50,000 naira. That was more than Esther's entire monthly salary. "I'll figure it out," she said firmly. Over the next week, Esther became a ghost of herself. She sold her phone, her only valuable possession. She borrowed money from a loan shark at an outrageous interest rate. She skipped meals entirely, saving every naira for Papa Joe's medical bills. She visited him every evening after work, bringing him fruit when she could afford it, or just sitting by his bedside when she couldn't. "Why do you do this?" Papa Joe asked one evening, his voice still weak. "You're destroying yourself for a useless old man." "You're not useless." Esther's voice was fierce. "You're my friend, and friends take care of each other." Papa Joe's eyes filled with tears. He reached out and took her hand. "You have a beautiful heart, my daughter. Never let this wicked world steal that from you." But the wicked world wasn't finished with Esther yet. The crisis came on a Friday afternoon. Esther was at her station when Mr. Thomas approached with 2 security guards and Michael Adams himself. "Esther," Mr. Thomas said loudly, ensuring everyone could hear, "we need you to come with us." "What's wrong?" Esther's heart hammered. "There's been a theft. 500,000 naira missing from the cash office. And evidence suggests you're involved. The assembly line ground to a halt as everyone turned to stare. Esther felt dizzy. That's impossible. I've never stolen anything in my life. Then you won't mind if we search your locker, Michael Adams said coldly. They marched her to the changing room, the entire factory watching. Mary and Ruth whispered excitedly, barely hiding their satisfaction. When they opened Esther's locker, her blood turned to ice. There, tucked beneath her spare uniform, was a thick envelope. Mr. Thomas pulled it out and counted. 500,000 naira. Exactly the amount missing. I didn't put that there. Esther's voice rose in panic. I swear to God, I've never seen that money before. Someone is framing me. Likely story. Mary called out from the crowd. Maybe you needed money for that madman you're always feeding. Several workers gasped. Ruth joined in. We all know she's been desperate for money. She even sold her phone. Because I was helping someone who was sick. Esther pleaded, turning to Michael Adams. Sir, please, you have to believe me. I would never steal. Never. But Michael's face was stone. I've heard enough thieves swear on their lives. The evidence is clear. He turned to the security guards. Take her to the security office. We're calling the police. No, please. Esther felt tears streaming down her face. Please, sir, just check the cameras. Someone put that money in my locker. I'm innocent. Cameras in the changing room? Michael's laugh was bitter. We don't have cameras there. Privacy concerns. Convenient for you, isn't it? As the security guards led her away, Esther caught Mary's eye. The woman was smirking, barely containing her triumph. And in that moment, Esther understood. This was planned. Carefully, cruelly planned. She spent the night in the security office, sobbing until she had no tears left. They'd called the police, who said they'd come Monday to take her statement and possibly arrest her. Over the weekend, she'd be suspended without pay pending investigation. Esther thought of James, waiting at home, wondering where she was. She thought of Papa Joe in his hospital bed. She thought of her mother's voice. If you have only 2 spoons of rice, share one. She tried to do right, and look where it had gotten her. But Michael Adams couldn't sleep that night either. He sat in his office long after everyone had gone home, staring at the closed-circuit television system on his computer. It was true. There were no cameras in the changing room, but there were cameras everywhere else. Something about Esther's desperate plea nagged at him. He'd seen true guilt before, the shifty eyes, the elaborate excuses. Esther had simply declared her innocence and begged him to check the evidence. What if she was telling the truth? He pulled up the footage from the past week, starting from Monday. He watched Esther arrive each morning, watched her rush past her co-workers, watched her at her station. He saw Mary and Ruth's constant harassment. He saw Esther eating alone. Then he saw something else. On Wednesday afternoon, during the chaos of a machinery breakdown when everyone was distracted, he watched Mary slip into the changing room, carrying something under her uniform. She was inside for 3 minutes. When she emerged, she was empty-handed and smiling. Michael's jaw clenched. He kept watching. He saw Ruth creating a distraction at the cash office. He saw Mr. Thomas, who had access to the safe, taking out the money and handing it to Mary in a blind spot of the warehouse. It was all there, the entire conspiracy, playing out in digital silence. Michael felt something he hadn't felt in years. Shame. He'd been so quick to judge, so ready to believe the worst, because that's what he'd learned to do after being betrayed. But in his cynicism, he'd become blind to real character. He thought of Esther feeding the homeless man every morning. The security guard had mentioned it several times, often with admiration in his voice. That girl has a good heart, sir, he'd said. Michael had dismissed it as naive foolishness. But now, he saw it differently. He picked up his phone. Monday morning, Michael called an emergency meeting in the factory hall. Every worker was required to attend. Esther arrived last, her eyes swollen from crying, her body trembling with exhaustion. She spent the weekend in anguish, barely eating, barely sleeping. James had found her Saturday evening and cried in her arms. Sister, tell me it's not true. Tell me you didn't steal. I didn't, she whispered. I promise you, James. I didn't. But would anyone believe her? As she entered the hall, she saw Papa Joe sitting in the front row. Her heart nearly stopped. Papa Joe was there, but he looked completely different. He was clean, well-dressed in an expensive Ibata, sitting straight and alert. Next to him sat Michael Adams. Everyone, please settle down, Michael said, his voice carrying across the room. I've called this meeting to address the theft that occurred last week. Mary and Ruth exchanged nervous glances. I want to start by apologizing to someone, Michael continued. Esther, please come forward. On shaking legs, Esther walked to front. She couldn't understand what was happening. I falsely accuse you of theft, Michael said, and the room erupted in whispers. I did not properly investigate before rushing to judgment. For that, I am deeply sorry. Esther's mind was spinning. Sir, I don't understand. The security footage revealed the real thieves. Michael's voice turned cold as he looked at Mary, Ruth, and Mr. Thomas. Mary Okonkwo, Ruth Adeyemi, and Thomas Okafor conspired to steal 500,000 naira from the company and frame Esther for it. Security, please escort them out. The police are already on their way. The room exploded in shocked exclamations. Mary's face went pale. No, you can't prove. I have video evidence of everything. Michael cut her off. Save your lives for the police. As the three conspirators were led away, Mary screaming, Ruth crying, Mr. Thomas silent, Esther stood frozen, unable to process what had just happened. Then Papa Joe stood up. He walked slowly to the center of the room, and everyone fell silent. There was something about his presence now, a dignity and authority that commanded attention. My name is not Papa Joe, he began, his voice stronger than Esther had ever heard it. My name is Joseph Adams. I am the father of Michael Adams and the founder of this factory, before I retired and gave it to my son. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Esther felt her knees weaken. 10 years ago, I lost my beloved wife. Joseph continued. In my grief, I became bitter and withdrawn. My relationship with my son suffered. I said terrible things, and we became estranged. Eventually, I realized I had become a man I didn't recognize, angry, judgmental, suspicious of everyone. He paused, his eyes sweeping the room. 5 months ago, I decided to do something drastic. I disguised myself as a homeless man and positioned myself near this factory. I wanted to see what kind of people worked here, what kind of community my son had built. I wanted to know if there was still kindness in this world, or if everyone was as cruel as I had become. Esther's eyes filled with tears as understanding dawned. Day after day, I sat under that orange tree. Joseph said, hundreds of people walked past me. Most ignored me. Some insulted me. Children threw stones. But one person, only one person stopped. He turned to Esther, and his voice cracked with emotion. This young woman, who had so little herself, shared her food with me every single day. She called me her friend. She sat with me and talked to me like I was human. And when I got sick, she paid my hospital bills, money she didn't have, money she borrowed and sacrificed for a dirty old stranger that everyone else called crazy. Tears streamed down Esther's face. I have been rich and I have been poor, Joseph said. I have worn expensive clothes and rags. And I tell you this truth. Wealth reveals nothing about character, but how you treat someone who can do nothing for you, that reveals everything. He stepped closer to Esther and took her hands. My daughter, you have shown me that kindness still exists. You have shown me that goodness is real. You fed me when I was hungry. You visited me when I was sick. You defended me when others mocked. You did right when no one was watching. And now, everyone is watching. He turned to address the crowd. Esther will be promoted to floor supervisor, with a salary increase of 200%. Her brother's school fees will be paid in full through university, and she will receive a bonus of 5 million naira for the suffering she has endured. The room erupted in applause, but Esther couldn't hear it over the pounding of her heart. But more than that, Joseph said quietly, meant only for her, you have given me something no money can buy. You gave me back my faith in humanity. You reminded me who I wanted to be, and you brought me back to my son. He looked at Michael, who stood with tears in his own eyes. "I'm sorry, son," Joseph said. "I'm sorry for the years I wasted being bitter. I'm sorry for the words I said. Can you forgive an old fool?" Michael crossed the space between them and embraced his father. "There's nothing to forgive, Dad. I'm just glad you're home." Esther watched them, overwhelmed by emotions she couldn't name. Grace approached and hugged her, crying. Other workers surrounded her, apologizing for their silence, for not standing up for her. But all Esther could think about was her mother's words. "The person you feed today might be the angel who saves you tomorrow." In the weeks that followed, life changed dramatically for Esther. She moved with James into a proper two-bedroom apartment. For the first time in years, they had enough food, enough security, enough everything. James cried when she told him his school fees were paid. "Sister, God has answered our prayers." But the biggest change was more subtle. Michael Adams began stopping by her new supervisor's office regularly, ostensibly to discuss factory operations. But their conversations increasingly drifted to other topics. Their childhoods, their dreams, their losses. "I was wrong about so many things," Michael admitted one evening as they reviewed productivity reports. "I let betrayal make me bitter. I stopped seeing people as individuals and started seeing everyone as potential threats." "That's understandable," Esther said gently. "When you're hurt, you build walls. But walls keep out the good along with the bad." Michael looked at her intently. "You could have built walls after your parents died. You could have become bitter, selfish. But you didn't. How?" Esther thought about it. I think suffering can do two things. It can make you hard, or it can make you soft. It can close your heart or open it. And every day we choose which one. And you chose to stay soft. "I chose to remember that I'm not the only one hurting," Esther said. "Everyone has their own pain. And maybe the best way to heal your own pain is to help someone else with theirs." Michael reached across the desk and took her hand. "You're an extraordinary woman, Esther." She smiled. "I'm just a woman who knew how to share rice." Their relationship deepened slowly, naturally, like a seed growing into a tree. Joseph watched with quiet joy, often joking that his hospital stay was the best investment he ever made. 6 months later, on a sunny Saturday morning, Michael took Esther back to the orange tree, where it had all begun. "This is where I first saw you," he said, "through the security camera feed. I was curious why my guard kept mentioning you. So I watched, and I saw you sitting here with my father, sharing your lunch, treating him with dignity." "I was just being human," Esther said. "No." Michael shook his head. "You were being exceptional, and I was so blind I almost destroyed you because of it." He took her hands. "Esther, I don't deserve you. I know that, but I'm asking anyway, will you marry me?" Esther's eyes widened. She looked at the orange tree, remembering all those mornings with Papa Joe. She thought about her mother's wisdom. She thought about how kindness had saved her life in ways she never expected. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." The wedding took place 3 months later, in a beautiful ceremony at the Lagos Cathedral. James walked his sister down the aisle, beaming with pride, and at the front beside Michael stood Joseph. No longer Papa Joe the madman, but simply a father watching his son marry the woman who had changed both their lives. In his speech at the reception, Joseph shared his final wisdom. "I have learned this in my many years," he said to the gathered guests. "Kindness is a seed. You plant it not knowing what will grow. Maybe nothing grows. Maybe something small. But sometimes it becomes a mighty tree that provides shade for generations." He raised his glass. "To Esther, who planted seeds of kindness in rocky soil and refused to stop watering them. To my son, who learned to see again. And to all of us who must remember, do right when no one is watching. Protect the weak. Tell the truth. Mockery is loud, but it does not last. Kindness is quiet, but it changes everything." "To kindness," the room chorused. As Esther danced with her new husband, she caught sight of the orange tree through the window. That same tree where it all began, where a poor girl shared rice with a stranger, where an old man tested the world and found goodness, where love took root in the most unexpected soil. She thought of her mother, hoping she was watching from heaven, seeing that her daughter had remembered the lesson. If you have only 2 spoons of rice, share one, because the person you feed today might be the angel who saves you tomorrow. Or, in Esther's case, might become your family forever. The truth had walked slowly, but it had reached home. And kindness, quiet, patient kindness, had changed everything. The end. Do right when no one is watching. Protect the weak. Tell the truth. Mockery is loud, but it does not last. Kindness is quiet, but it changes the world. Papa Joseph Adams.